Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tammy Tuckey Show. My name is Tammy Tuckey, and it's good to see you. So, tonight I'm very excited to welcome author John Urbancik to the show. Welcome, John.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's very much an honor. I there's like a long story to this, and we were talking off air, but just to let our readers know, we're going to be promoting a special book tonight called The Disney Animation Renaissance Behind the Glass at the Florida Studio. We both have our color. We're both ready. We're twinsies. And it was interesting because we're going to be talking about the specific part of MGM Studios, which used to be at Disney. Well, it is, but now it's called Hollywood Studios. And at the time, there was a little center about the animation building itself. And I heard about this book, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing to read. It's so niche and specific because I grew up going to the animation studio. And this is like a first for me after doing 10 years of interviews, because unfortunately the person behind this book, which is MaryELescher, she's no longer with us. And John has been so gracious in being able to join me tonight to talk about the book because it just came out and we wanted to promote this wonderful piece of work by Mary. So John, I before we kind of get into the animation and talking about the book, you sent some beautiful pictures of Mary. So can you talk about Mary and who was she and what was your relationship with her?
Well, we met at a party in 1998, and it was the Single Losers Anti Valentine's Day party at the house of another person on the animation crew. And we started dating like the very next day. We were together for over 20 years. So I was there for the last 5 years that she was at the studio. I was there when she worked at the studio in Sydney. uh, was there when she went to Madrid and worked at the studio there. And I was with her the entire time she was going to FSU, earning her doctorate in art history with a focus on film and animation history, which is why she was able to do the book. And why she did the book, in fact, was because she was working on that. It was her lifetime thing. When she was like 5 or 6 years old, she saw Fantasia and decided she wanted to be an animator. She went to the School of
Wow.
Visual Arts to study animation and just kept applying to Disney until they hired her.
And good thing they did, right?
Yes, she got to work on some of the best films of our lifetime, of anybody's lifetime.
And she was at the animation studios at the beginning in 1989 when it
She
opened.
was she was part of the opening crew. Yes, I think that picture on the left is about then, or maybe even a little earlier. That might have been her going to the parks before she was part of the crew, or before the MGM Studios even existed.
Mhm.
And that picture on the right was actually at the wedding of her niece. That's me in the mirror.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, there you are. She's so cute. I love her outfit. I love you guys taking beautiful pictures. Here's a really, really sweet photo of the two of you and her trying on a gorgeous blue hat. I love the choice.
I actually don't think she bought the hat. I think the hat was in St. Augustine in Florida, and I
Mhm.
think that bottle of wine was in New York,
Oh,
in,
okay.
in New
So
York City one day.
it was it a good wine?
I can only I can only guess that it was, because I would remember if it was particularly bad, wouldn't I?
Well, good, as long as it was good. Well, so let's give a little glimpse because unfortunately, as I said before, since MGM Studios changed, as it has changed so much since it opened in 1989, and I kind of was like right in the middle. My first experience there was around 1997. But when the park first opened, the whole premise was that this animation studio would be a working animation studio. So let's take a little look back on one of the behind the scenes clips of the actual space, so you can see if you've never gotten to experience it. So here we go.
As they pass through the portals of the animation studio, guests on the backstage tour gain admission to the heart and soul of Disney. Here, the illusion of life is born as these artists create animation using highly specialized techniques which have evolved over half a century. The guests, meanwhile, are breaking new ground.
Our foremost objective here was to create a real studio that the guests could come by and really see in operation, where we don't consider ourselves an attraction as such, although that's indeed what we are to the guests. We're a fully operational studio. We've opened our doors and let our guests come in and watch our artists at work, but what they're seeing is a real studio.
Which is really cool. Like, where else have you since then or before then been able to do something like that, right?
I don't think anywhere. I think this was a unique experience, and it was only there for less than 15 years. The studio existed for 15 years, but the nature of that tour, the nature of the experience outside of the studio changed pretty quickly, because the whole process was changing at the time. Because while they were opening this studio, they were also beginning to shift from what they'd been using for decades, cell animation, into computer assisted stuff that eventually led to what they do today, which is driven by the computer. Even when they hand draw, they're still doing all of that on a computer rather than on a cell anymore, or for the most part, for the big studios.
And this was, as you said, this is big. So there's this major change in animation, and they're rolling in the Little Mermaid's at peak, and they're kind of rolling out around Brother Bear. And so you have this like whole gap, but I just remember being so amazed as a kid walking through and seeing the Back to Neverland film with Walter Cronkite and Robin Williams kind of like setting you up. And then you go through this beautiful space, as you just saw, with the glass, the fishbowl, as they call it. Yes. And Mary was one of the fishbowl members.
She was. My first time ever going into the studio was behind that glass. My first time in the studio was as a guest, seeing the animation from the point of view of people in the park. But my first time visiting Mary in the studio, she took me to her desk on the other side of that glass. And it was that same glass that was there. That's the original studio. They did build a new one after about 10 years. And that's right about the time that we started dating. So when I met her, it was still the old studio, but it wasn't long before I was there for the opening of the new studio, which changed the tour dramatically.
Oh, big time, because the tram wasn't at it. The whole space is all very much changed and switched around. So, you get it's a little bit confusing, but I suggest to check out Martin Vids. He has some really great videos about showing how things have changed over time through the courses of years, especially through all Disney attractions. He's amazing and documenting that. And that actually helped a lot for me. Although I will say that Mary's book has a couple of different explanations and maps that show earlier and also later down the line how things have changed as well too, which was great because it helped me kind of keep track of like where we were, what decade we were in, where we were in the space, which was great because I really appreciated that because I forget so easily.
I know for her, I mean, she experienced the whole thing. She was there from opening day. She left after Brother Bear, but just before the studio actually closed. Because but when the studio closed, we were already on our way or about to be on our way to Australia so that she could work at the Sydney studio, which also closed on her. So
she had a lot of good luck, but she had a great long run there. So
she was also opening crew at the Paris studio. So, but that was before I knew her. So, but she was there to teach, to train. She was training at the time. She was training a camera person. And I guess his response to that was, well, if you're going to teach me camera, I'm going to teach you French wine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think we benefited from that.
I love it. And by the way, Christy Connolly says, the wine you showed in that picture is always good wine.
Christy, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Christy and Mary worked together in the Australia studio. And while we were in Australia, there was a lot of good wine to be discovered in Australia too.
Yeah. Well, hey, wherever there's good wine, there's good company. And that's all that matters to me. So, so not highlighting on all the, sadness of losing the studio, but Mary was a part of something so unique and really made the history books. Again, another reason I didn't understand why there was no other information about it. So when did she come to the idea that, hey, we need to document this experience, this very unique experience and this story? And she knows everybody. So when did she make that, that decision?
I think it was shortly after we left Australia, which would have been about 2006, I think, when they closed that studio and we came back to the States. She decided to go to school for her doctorate in art history so that she would have the credentials to be the person to do that sort of book. Her original intention was just to do a history of the Florida studio. And as she did her schooling and she did her studies, she found out that there was nothing that focused on the Florida studio. If anything, it was like half a chapter in something else that would have been a big book that said, oh yeah, by the way, there was this studio. I mean, they were B unit on things like Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Aladdin. They were the A unit on Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, and Brother Bear. So it's not like they had a small role to play. It just seems small in comparison to, say, the Burbank studio, which started with Snow White.
Mm-hmm. It seemed swept under the carpet. So what a great idea to kind of pull it together. So it took from 2006. When was she kind of officially finished the book? How long did it take to get all of those interviews and that research completed for her?
She started, first she started school. She had to get a master's and then she had to earn the doctorate. And so she had to get the master's first. That would have been, she started school probably around 2008 or 9, when she went back. And she finished it in 2017. So that would have been,
so
that would have included all of the interviews, all of the research, multiple trips to places like the Animation Research Library, multiple visits back to the animation studio, which was vastly changed at that point, because now it's just offices. It's like regular office people. Yep. It's kind of sad.
It's amazing show. It's very weird to walk through, just as a guest, to walk through what once was. Because now it's like I was talking to John. I was like, it's just a Star Wars meet and greet center, but the characters aren't there right now because COVID kind of shut that all down. So now you're standing in there and listening to the same 30-second John Williams music loop while looking at some random, not that it's bad, but it's like it's so weird. It's just really weird to walk in there like, what happened?
She spent tons and tons of time interviewing people because she wasn't relying on her own memory. She wasn't relying on one or two other people. She interviewed everyone from ink and paint, administration, all the way up to directors, producers, Max Howard, who was the head of the studio for a long time. Everybody that she could talk to, she did. And not everybody wanted to talk about it. There's some people that was very emotional. The end of the studio was a very emotional time for some people. It was heartbreaking to go through and experience in real time. And some people, that's a hard thing to recover from sometimes. And you don't want to dredge up those memories again. So some people, even though they were friendly with her and friends with her and would continue to be all the way until she died, they didn't want to talk about their time at the studio. On the record. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I kind of figured like it must have been very upsetting. I think there's all this talk, there's a lot of research and information about, what had happened to animation studios and bringing it back after such a sad time, for animation. I'm such a big advocate of most of those films that came out after Tarzan because I grew up with them, and it seems, again, they're kind of swept underneath the carpet, and except maybe Lilo and Stitch and Mulan. Those two were made at the Florida studios and are still, beloved dearly, but it's very sad to see
Mulan
all of
was
that.
there first. Mulan was there first, and
Yes.
always had a special place for her, and for me even today, because that's what she was working on when we met.
I
And
loved the parade. I was just surprised that, remember when they used to actually, if there was a film, they would promote it with a something, in the parks, and that parade was amazing. And then getting to see them promote that the movie was out at the animation studios was such a joy. Like, it was
Mhm.
wonderful to be there. You had to be there to feel that. I guess I'm sure they were all very proud of how successful it became, and and
They
and
were.
everybody
They
loves it
were.
still.
I think they were. From my memory, everybody loved what they were doing for the most part. I don't remember anybody who was like, I never want to do one of these again.
Oh, we have a wonderful comment. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but you said I could take a John Williams loop if I had some good wine. And Christy just sent a little emoji of a wine. It's and one of the cool things is Max Howard posted a video, kind of like a background of what everybody was doing. And who shows up in this video? This is back from 1989. Mary. So I got to play this clip for you. Here she is.
Camera department at Disney is a wonderful place. This is where we make the magic happen. We take what the animators have done, add moves to it, add special effects, and put it up on film. The animators make the motion, but we have to add camera movements and special effects. It's called scene planning. First we had the layout down, showing what's going to be in the background. Then they give us a start and stop position, showing us where the character is going to be at all times. The scene planning in it is going in just about every frame.
That was really cool to find. I was like, oh my gosh, there she is.
Yeah, she started in camera and switched over to scene planning because her boss, manager, I don't know what the term is that they used, it told her that she didn't have a choice. She had to do this, not as a I'm your boss and you're going to listen to what I do, but more of a, if you want to make this your life, camera is going to not be necessary anymore, and you're going to need to switch over. And it became less necessary because now they wouldn't be doing, as they progressed, they would stop shooting film, stop shooting the cells and start scanning and combining the cells in scene planning. And scene planning became sort of like the cinematographers of animation.
Very interesting. Like as the process was changing, they were having to adapt. I remember I talked to director Jerry, who did the Back to Neverland film, and they said that when they were filming, they kind of had to add an additional portion because everything and how animation was being done was being changed.
Yes.
And so they had to add something into the film to kind of like update it. I think it was like 2 years into it or something like that. So.
And the order of some things changed too, but the specifics of that I'm not going to remember. I wasn't involved. I was never part of the animation team. I was what Mary called an animation wife, because most people on the animation crew at that time would have been male, and so the wives would have been the ones that showed up at the parties.
Well, she was representing girl power. I'm so excited because, again, it's another thing where I feel sometimes when we see the behind the scenes featurettes, we don't get to hear a lot of the female voice in how things were felt and done and lived through. So again, another breath of fresh air while reading her book. And we actually have a question from Steven. He wrote, was there anything worked on over there that we never got to see the end result of, like an unfinished film?
Probably. I wasn't there. Remember, I wasn't part of the crew, but I do know that there was something that they were working on that she talks about in the book that I think was called My Peoples. And then had a couple of other names along the way and a couple of variations. That was never completed. I think that is now a lost project. I don't think they'll ever go back to that. That's the only
So
one I can think of off the top of my head. But like I said, I wasn't part of that crew, so I don't know if there's other things. And there might be other things that only got like concept that they talked about. I know that crew members were able to pitch concepts, so I'm not sure about any of those either. How many of those
that would have been cool.
got only made part way, but some of those ended up becoming things. I think Chris Saunders, Lilo and Stitch, I think that was a pitch that was his original idea. If I remember right, it was his original idea that he pitched to the studio.
Christy says, Barry Cook's pet project, My Peoples.
Yes.
Thank you, Christy. So again, Stephen, if you want to learn it more, and our listeners, please go ahead and get a copy of the Disney Animation Renaissance Behind the Glass at the Florida Studio. And I love this design, by the way. It's like perfect because this is exactly what it was like. So
the publisher did that. I had nothing to do with that. They asked me, what do you think should be on the cover? And I'm like, I don't have any idea.
By the way, our friend on Twitter, BioReconstruct, he sent, or he or she, they're anonymous, but they sent some pictures from behind the scenes of Mary and some of the crew. So I was like, oh, this is great. Let's add to that. Apparently they had yearbooks too at the end of every year. That was for fun. This is at the Hanna-Barbera Universal Studios attraction. That's like a film thing. He was like, you got to post that. You got to share that.
I never saw that picture before.
I'll send it to you. I'll send you a copy. Here's the camera club.
Mm-hmm.
And John Cunningham was the camera club supervisor.
He also eventually became the head of scene planning in Orlando.
There you go. That's really cool. And I think this is one of the last pictures I have for tonight. Was this one of the museums?
I don't think so. I think that was
like one of the last tables there, like at the studio, you think?
I think that had to be at the studio because it doesn't look anything like her animation desk.
Okay. It looks like one of the old ones, which is really cool.
It's definitely an old
that
style.
one.
the desk that I have that was the animation desk she had at home was the same style that they would have used and from the same place and time that Hanna-Barbera was, or no, not Hanna-Barbera, Fleischman was doing the Superman and Mighty Mouse cartoons in New York City. That's where she picked up that desk. It's the same type that they would have used. I can't guarantee that it was used on any of that, but I have no reason to believe it wasn't.
That's pretty cool, though.
It's a different desk than this. This one's a little bit more. I don't remember where this is from, but it had to be after Lilo and Stitch because I recognize that that shirt. That's a Lilo and Stitch Hawaiian shirt that she and I both have.
It's so cute. I have so many things Lilo and Stitch. I love it. It's so adorable. I want one of those actually. I was looking at it. I was like, it's so cute. So when she's creating this story, and you said it was around 2017, she kind of had all the pieces together. How long did it take her to start writing the book? And when did she kind of stop and things were put on hold because of her passing?
So the way the doctorate works at FSU, you have to do all the classwork and you have to pass like tests to show that you are, more than just competent in the areas that you're doing. And I can't remember all the terms for that. She had to get through all of that before she could actually do the work on the dissertation, because this started as a dissertation. Mm-hmm. And I think the dissertation took about 3 years, but she had already started doing like the interviews and stuff like that because she always knew what that was going to be. About 3 years to get the dissertation done, and then she had to revamp it to make it the book, because the story that she wanted to tell in the book was not exactly the same as the story that she wanted to tell in the dissertation. It covers the same time frame, it covers the same period, it has the same basic flow, but there's still some differences. There's less art theory in the book than there was in the original dissertation. But none of that was disrupted by her diagnosis, because she finished that. She was Dr. Lescher, technically, before she took the job with Spa Studios in Madrid, which is where she worked on Klaus, which is a Christmas film on Netflix. That was the last film that she worked on. You can watch that. It's if you watch all the way through all the credits, it's dedicated to her. The very last thing that comes up is a dedication, because she died before that film was finished. But she was diagnosed with cancer in Spain while working on that film. Actually, after her part of that film was already done. So we were looking at where it was that we were going to go to next when that interrupted. And from diagnosis until she actually died was a very short time. This wasn't like a long, protracted battle with it. This was by the way, this is going to be quick. And yeah, it was quick. From the time that we knew she had it till the time that she died was only about 3 months. She signed the contract with University of Illinois Press for the book before she died, and I worked with them after, doing what she would have been doing as far as going through the galleys and stuff like that. The process of doing the book after that, though, did take a long time, because that's when COVID happened too, so that extended everything. So it didn't really, none of it was slowed down because of her passing. I was just able to help finish it. The two things that were left undone were the movie Klaus, which she knew would be finished because the crew on that was close to the end. She rolled off before some people did, but and this book, and she knew that I would be able to finish the book because I'm a writer too, so I've already had experience doing a lot of this type of thing. I had worked with her on editing from before she even started writing this, when she was just doing papers for school. We used to talk about how she didn't seem to know how to use a comma. The comma key would just happen on, or not happen at random when she was writing her papers at the beginning. She got a lot better at it later, but
no more run-on sentences with extra commas.
Right, exactly. And make sure you put them where they're supposed to be.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So with that being said, because I'm very honored, this is the first interview you've done to promote the book, and yes. I really enjoyed this. This is something, like, even as a kid, when they used to, at the time, they would make books about animation, probably in the 80s and 70s, and my dad had a major collection of them. I would just take them off and look at them and read what it had to say, and this would be something I would have loved as a kid, just because there are pictures of experiences that she had, and again, of like where everything was in the studio itself, but also the stories and the explanations of things. Like, one of my favorite parts I was telling you was the John Henry part, and I have my little John Henry vinylmation tonight with his hammer. And I have in the show notes the link to purchase this book via Amazon, and I really suggest, this is a great book to even give to somebody who is a big fan of Walt Disney World for Christmas, because it's very niche, but a lot of us experienced this wonderful time at the studios, but we didn't experience it the way Mary and so many of her colleagues did. And I think I love that story. Like, I think there could be a documentary out of this. You know what I mean? I think, like, it's the beginning of something, because just wonderful stories. So I really enjoyed it. What's one of the most joyous things about working on this book, to kind of conclude it and finish it for Mary? What was one of the most joyous things for you about it?
Oh, what? I was with her from the beginning of this, and I was there all the way through the end. And I guess for me, really, it was seeing it done, seeing her vision completed, even though she wasn't able to see it, which I guess is joyous, but also made me cry. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that exactly, because the whole process was, for me, it was really kind of supporting her during during the writing and the researching and production, and then it was just seeing it through to the end. And at that point, it was editing and answering questions about, well, did these pictures go where they're supposed to go and stuff like that, which was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. So it was a lot more work for me than it would have been for her, because I didn't know where the pictures necessarily were supposed to go, and I would have to reread it all the time. Whereas she would have been able to look and say yes, because this is all about her experiences, and she's the expert on the things that she wrote about in here. I am more of a spectator, but I was with her for the entire production of the book. That was probably the best part, traveling with her to do some of the research, because we had to go to LA, we had to go to New York a couple of times. We had to go back to Orlando, which is where the studio is, because we weren't living in Orlando anymore then. Going back to the studio, though, was hard. Years after the studio had closed, going back for the first time, she needed things like, there's a Bridget's Garden. There's a picture of in there, which I'm not going to tell the story of that because I will ruin it, because I don't know it well. I never knew Bridget Hartley. But she was somebody who had been part of the animation studio from the beginning, and she had been part of the crew for like Roger Rabbit in London, I believe. And we needed to go and, first of all, see if that monument was still there, and then get pictures of things like that in what had been the place where she basically lived at for 15 years and was now a cubicle farm office, which was very sad. But there was still, we noticed the things that we like. It was still the animation. It was still an animation tour at that point. This was before the Star Wars stuff, and there was a room near the front. It might have even been like the ante room before going into the studio, where you get to become an animator yourself. That had a wall which included one of the bears, and included Stitch, included Mushu. And it was it was a memorial to the Orlando studio that had been on those premises before. That was kind of cool, and she noticed that immediately. I didn't notice it because it was her life. It was everything for her when she was there.
When you said that, it just gave me like a flashback to one of my just a memory when they were starting to switch from the original attraction to this new updated version of the space. And I remember there was like a mustard floor, like a rug, and a mustard curtain, because the curtain, if I'm not mistaken, my memory might not serve me correctly, but it was kind of pulled because you would go to sections of the windows, and then Robin Williams would be on the little TV screen explaining what you're seeing. And I think the curtain was like pulled, so you'd be like in that section, and then it would open up, and then you'd move to the next section. So when you just said that, like, I don't know why, it just kind of like came to my mind. And
I think it was a mustard yellow wall. So maybe you've seen it and you're just kind of remembering it and associating it with other things of the same color in the same place.
Yes, because I remember just that space, and it was a very, like, for my family, it was a very happy time, and many families were just thrilled to feel like they were a part of it. So even being a part in a small way of Mary's story of being onlookers and watching this magic happen, you know?
You probably saw her. Just
I
if
probably
you if
did, yeah.
if you went through the fishbowl during one of those tours at the beginning, she was there. She was on. She was in there.
And sometimes I just go on YouTube and I just type in, old MGM studio videos because people are posting their
I didn't know
beautiful
there were
memories.
any.
There are
I didn't know there
tons,
were
and
any. The videos that you showed me, I had no idea we were going to see those.
I'll send you some full links so you could see, because they're really cool to see even the home videos that people are posting, because some of them show footage that Disney never captured in B-roll. So you get to see other, magical things that you never thought you would. So I'll send what I had to you. But I do have a little surprise for you. I did ask one of Mary's friends to make a video. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Max Howard.
Hi, Tammy. Hello, John. It's very nice of me to be able to be part of this today, although it's a pre-recorded message, and it's a message from me from the United Kingdom, which is where I am at the moment. Now, I must tell you, first of all, that I've not read the book, and it's not through want of trying, but I'm in the United Kingdom and the book simply isn't available here through Amazon or any other outlet. So at some point I will get my hands on it. But I did want to, participate today because Mary was a very important part of the studio. And I think what I've loved most about the fact of reconnecting with her when she contacted me regarding the book and wanted to interview me. So I loved that trip down memory lane. That was incredibly important to me. But what I love the fact that somebody in the trenches, call it the trenches, I think what Mary will have captured is the fact it comes from within the workforce, within the team, and it was one hell of a team. And I'm so proud that Mary's written this book about her time and her experiences at the Florida studio. It was incredibly important to me, and I know I'm going to love reading this book. I'm just sorry that Mary's not with us to celebrate her success, because she would have the entire studio and hopefully many animation fans cheering her for doing this. So thank you, and thank you, Tammy, for inviting me to say a few words today. Hey, thanks a lot now, and a very Merry Christmas. Bye now.
I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I muted myself by accident, but I was just going to say I love Max, and she talks so sweet. Like, she said he was one of the core members, the heart of that studio. So when he left, it was very different. It wasn't like the same, but he provided so many great details for her to support the book, and he's just great. I love him. So thank you, Max, for sending that over.
I think I only met him once or twice. He was not part of the studio when I met Mary. He had already moved on to what it was he did next, and I don't know what he did next. I don't know his whole history. I just know he went on to do great things.
I laughed really hard at this section, and I won't tell all the stories because, again, please go ahead and purchase a copy of the Disney Animation Renaissance Behind the Glass at the Florida studio. But he talks about kind of having to defend the animators for their, silly games and pranks. And his main thing was like, this really is the creative STEM. Like, we sit at a table for 8 hours. Sometimes we need to have fun and play a prank on one another, and you'll get to read more about that in the book. But I just loved how she includes some really funny stories. It was great because I didn't even think of that. Who wants to be sitting at a desk for 8 hours all day long, and you need to creatively get into the scene. So I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I remember some of those stories. I'm not going to spoil any either. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm not going to spoil any of those either, but I do remember some of that. And I remember when the new studio opened, they had things built in like ping pong tables and stuff like that. But for that original studio, they didn't have that. They didn't have the space for it. That wasn't part of the plan at the beginning. But I know that every once in a while somebody would make an announcement and and by announcement I mean they would stand up at their desk and say rubber band fight, and suddenly and this would happen in front of people who were there to see how it's all being made. So what they're seeing instead is things like that.
They're not seeing what they're being told they're going to see. But
it's still part of the process. It's still part of the process. Part of the creative process is, because I'm creative too. And she was an artist, I was a writer. We were like the perfect team. And I know the creative process, and she did as well. And part of that is being able to step away for a moment and let off steam like that.
Absolutely
give a moment to let your mind wander, because sometimes you could focus on something and focus on it and keep working on it, but every once in a while you need your mind to wander a little bit, because that gives you a chance to not focus on it and gives your mind a moment to come back to it with a fresher perspective again.
Absolutely. You sometimes need those breaks. I go around sometimes where I'm at work, and I just like to go around and say hello to people and just get out of the space for a little bit. So that's I feel like every creative person has to do that at some point, or they'll just go crazy. And also there's more fun stories of the Halloween parties. Like, there is plenty more in here. You have to be able to get a chance to read. And I remember there was some footage of it online a while back. I'll have to find it. If I can find it, I'll send it to you, John. But, just wonderful stories. Her pride and joy, I'm sure, that she got to work for years to create this. And now it's out. And I hope that everybody gets a chance to go to Amazon. The link is below in the show notes, and purchase your copy. It's something that you absolutely have to have for your Disney library. And I'm so glad I get to add it to mine. So she's a Disney author. Look at her go. I'm so happy for her, and I'm happy that you can make it happen. You helped her, reach the end of the Yellow Brick Road. And now everybody gets to experience Emerald City. And all the trials and tribulations, but all the very happy things too that come with it. So, thank you very much for being able to tell your story, John, because I know I didn't know how. I've never done an interview like this before, and I didn't know how I wanted to kind of go about going with it, but you're just so sweet and kind. So I appreciate you answering all my questions, and I'll be sending you a virtual bottle of wine. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for everybody who has been joining us this evening and watching and commenting along. We not urge you, but we would love for you to continue the conversation with us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. If you've already gotten the book and you've read it, tell us what your favorite parts of it are. Are they similar to what we love? Do you have a special memory of going to the studios? What did you see? What films do you remember seeing being made? I remember one of the memories that comes out to me is when Treasure Planet was coming out. That was like a little bit later, but Mulan and Treasure Planet were like really key things during that time for me. And you can feel free to follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I'm at Tammy Tuckey, and John is at his full name. So at John Urbancik. And thanks, just overall, thanks again, everybody, for watching. And thank you again, John, for being a guest. Happy holidays to you. And see everybody very soon. But remember, when there's a smile in your heart, there's no better time to start. Good night, everybody. Bye, John.
Bye.